No quinto e último episódio da temporada Museus, refletimos sobre como as novas tecnologias de digitalização e interatividade estão transformando os museus da contemporaneidade. Série Gestão Cultural Mundo Afora. Mas uma troca de ideias sobre métodos e estratégias de gestão cultural está começando. Olá, eu sou Daniele Canedo e, como você, vivo na era da conectividade. Afinal, celulares e tablets com acesso à internet estão sempre por ali ao alcance das nossas mãos. E há quem diga que muito em breve, todos os objetos ao nosso redor estarão conectados à famosa internet das coisas. Mas nós estamos em um museu. E no setor museológico, toda essa conectividade divide opiniões. Alguns gestores mais otimistas garantem que a internet e as novas tecnologias estão transformando a relação do público com o museu. Por outro lado, outros gestores mais conservadores apontam para os problemas e as ameaças que tal conectividade pode representar para o acervo. No quinto e último episódio da série Gestão Cultural Mundo Afora, temporada Museus, nós falamos sobre novas tecnologias e as formas de engajamento com o público e conservação do acervo. Confira!
At the end of 1998, the gallery began a very important policy of digitizing the collection. And this was really at the very early stage of digital photography coming into cultural institutions. And this was an incredibly important piece of work because it meant that going forward we would have a complete collection of very high resolution images of the collection as a whole. And that formed a library of images which we have actually been using since the early 2000s. In 2000 we put the whole collection online, and we were able to do this primarily because we had this high quality collection of digitized images to work from. And we have also used those for our print on demand services so that the public can request a print of any of the works in the collection. And then in 2009, when we relaunched the website, all of those images were reused. And they're such good quality, it enables the public to zoom in and see incredible details in the works of art, perhaps more than you can when you stand in front of the actual object.
The purpose has always been to give an access to the collection through the internet, but we started in 2000. When I arrived here in 2000, it was really to create the online catalog. There was really no database. I mean, there were some people who had been working with databases in the institution, or like making Excel files to manage their collection. And what I did was to work with the Getty Institute and to work with an international standard that is called the Categories for the Description of the Works of Art, and to build up a true database that would go online. But it was in 2000, so there weren't too many online databases at the time. It went online in 2003. And our main problem, which is really Belgian, was that it had to be bilingual. So we had to find a system that would be truly bilingual. And that is what we started to do. Now, for the works themselves, when I started building up the catalog, of course, you have the description of the work, but you need to have the picture, otherwise it doesn't really make sense. And what we did at the time, we didn't have any digital camera. We were not working, I mean, the museum was not working with digital camera. So what we did first was to scan the Ektachromes that we had. Some of them were still in very good shapes, but of course, you imagine that some of them, dating back from 10 years or 15 years, turned completely green or wet or whatever. And so that's the time when we started really looking for a photographer that could set up a true policy for the institution to digitize the works of art. And it took us a while before we found that right person, because once again at the time, all these photographers devoted to art were starting to buy equipment, but didn't mean that they really knew how to use it fully and to meet the expectations of the museum. I mean, it could be very good photographers, but at the same time it was something very, very specific. So it took a while, and I would say that it was really around 2003, 2004 that we really started doing this on a regular basis. And now, of course, we only work with digital technology. When Google came to us, I thought it was a very good idea to do so, but some people in the institution were reluctant and say, no, we don't need Google, we're going to work with Europeana and so on. And I say, no, it has nothing to do with whether you like Google or you don't. You use Google every day like anybody else. Sometimes you use them and you don't even know you're using Google. And what was important for me is that being part of the Google Art project means that really being in the spotlight. I mean, people know you there, and when people search for a picture on Google, they will find results coming from very huge museums like the Met in New York or the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, and us. The second reason why I wanted to be part of it was that they were going to use a very, very high definition camera for one work. We had the ability to choose, and the result is just amazing. The result is incredible, what you see on your screen and the quality of the interface. There's no way we could ever compete with that technology. So that's also one argument I use to convince here the general director, saying, okay, this kind of interface, there is no way we could compete with that. So they came here, and you can tell that their team is really, really, used to work within big museum environments. And no, the relation was very, very good, honestly.
One of the advantages of creating a new building and moving collections to the new building, is that you have to find out, in terms for the move you make, we had to move 470,000 objects. It was a logistic operation which was in Antwerp never seen before. So we had to think about it, how do you deal with that? And one of the aspects and the main objectives was to find out what do we have in these museums, so we have a perfect idea of what we have to move to new museums. And one of the crucial elements in the inventory of these collections was not only the description, but also photographing everything. So every object we moved has been photographed and digitalized. The scripting, everything is also digitalized. And I believe that European museums are coming to us, because what did we do? And you can see that in the open depot. Every object now has a barcode, a scan code. So we would scan the object, and immediately we have the description and the photograph. The place where it is stocked in the museum, the description of the situation in terms of the conservation, and we can, from the digitalization out, we can make a list of all the objects which are in a bad condition and make choices in what are we going to restaurate or what are we going to conservate next 5 years. It's an operation that took about 5 or 6 years, and about 20 people worked on that. So it was a very huge investment that took about 5-6 years, but now we receive the benefits of it, because digitalizing your collection is also a good way of managing your collection.
Nós já estamos trabalhando para isso, né? Nós estamos nesse momento estamos trabalhando com todo o registro do acervo, né, de forma digital, né, registrar digitalmente esse acervo para posteriormente poder oferecê-lo, disponibilizá-lo ao público. Esse processo começou quando foi realizado o livro do acervo do MAN pelo Banco Safra. Então foi feito um trabalho, né, de fotografação de todas as obras, de catalogação, e agora estamos começando esse processo de digitalizar esse acervo.
É uma lei que está sendo revista. Atualmente o Ministério da Cultura está com isso em pauta. E assim, é um direito da família, é um direito que o artista tem. Mas assim, toda obra que é feita dentro do Brasil é patrimônio cultural do povo brasileiro. Então, acho que a gente cercear esse direito ao acesso a essa obra, a essas informações, é um pouco complexo.
It's a very tricky problem, and of course that's for most museums worldwide. I think we are a non-profit institution, we are a federal research institute, and yet we still have to clear copyrights before the works go online. So it is true that when we deal with contemporary art or modern art, it is always an issue. Right now we are working on a European project that is called Digitizing Contemporary Art, and my team and I, we are the work package leader for the work package 4, which is digitization, which means that we help other partners, 24 partners in total from many countries in Europe, to set up digitization plan and to make sure that they can really fulfill their goals. And one of the main issue, of course, is copyright clearance. What we do and what we must do actually is to clear the copyright, which means to pay the artist or most of the time artist rights societies who own the copyright. But what we did this time, for the first time, within the frame of this specific project, was to try to, I wouldn't say to avoid doing so, but really to go forward and to really get in touch with the artist and telling them, okay, we're working on a non-profit project. The aim is to make more contemporary art available through Europeana, which is the European online library. And we would like to find like an agreement, so to make sure that your work won't be used for commercial purpose, but we wouldn't have to pay an extra fee to put this work online. And it's working quite well, actually. I mean, the people understand, and they understand also the benefit that they can take from having more contemporary art within Europeana. And the next step we're working on is that on a regular basis, when we purchase a work of contemporary art, is to sign that kind of agreement with the artist or with the owner of the copyright, assuring them that the picture will never be used for commercial purpose, but that we can use it free of charge just to display the work on the internet.
The way the National Gallery is organised, it has the main gallery entity, but it also has a commercial company. And the commercial company is very much charged with exploiting the collection for commercial sales and use. And any profit that they create is fed back into the gallery. So it's very important that whatever I do in the main gallery is very complementary to what the company is trying to achieve. But my goal is very much about creating broad access to the collection. And so I work very closely with the commercial wing, and so we're very clear about where the line is in the sand. So for instance, I mentioned before that the gallery had published its whole collection online in 2000, and we did that in close liaison with the commercial company because we were making all of the artworks available at that time. So we're very clear, and we try and help people do the right thing. So we're very clear about the kind of use that people can make of these. So if it's personal use or educational use, there are really no issues at all. But if you then want to do something and exploit the collection commercially, that's where I hand you over to the company.
I'm sure that the museum will be changing for the next 20 years, and we will welcome more and more aspects, I don't know which one, but more and more aspects unusual for the museum today, but it will be a part of the experience of the museum. The museum is no more a place where you could find works and you have to decide to go there. It will be more and more an experience. So television, new technology, bars, and maybe, why not, other aspects. We have to sing and to invent the museum for the 21st century.
There was a time that when people went to the museum, you had an object, and behind that object there was a story. Now we live in a time, and I'm very happy with that you go to a museum and you want to pick up a story. And the story is told you by means of techniques, multimedia, interactive aspects, by Facebook, by Twitter, but also by movies. And all this gives and creates much more three-dimensionality, much more interactive way of dealing with what a museum is. In terms of the presentations, we invested quite a lot in multimedia, in movie, in auditive aspects. I believe, for example, and that's also to do with the experience, a new kind of experience we would like to bring when a visitor comes here to the Maas, is that we believe we are the first museum who have appointed a house composer, a componist, who created sensorial spaces, and he created soundscapes. And this soundscape, in every wake-up space, you hear a different kind of soundscape, which is related to the theme. We also work with new technologies by iPhones. If you come to the museum and with your iPhone, you can free download the application we made to discover the labels and all the text in 6, 7 different kind of languages. You can scan a barcode, your QR code, and have all the information. You can take it with you. Create with your favorite object, for example, Facebook communities. You can Twitter it, so it's much more interactive.
I think the gallery is very innovative when it comes to the use of technologies, and it tries very hard to always make a marriage between the technology and the audience, and really think about how we can tell the stories of the paintings in really interesting ways that engages the public. And we had an opportunity to partner with an organisation to help develop our first iPhone app. And this was something really innovative. We were the first museum to do this, seriously. And it worked incredibly well. The public were very enthusiastic about it. And very quickly we saw it become incredibly popular within iTunes. We had over 300,000 downloads, which is, compared to the average, is about 10,000. And in part, it was something about being able to keep this on your own device, and it's very personal to you, and to be able to use this anywhere as you wish. And so we were very happy with that. Recently, we launched a virtual tour of the gallery. So this is in part something to remind you if you have visited, but also if you never visit, or if you live at the other edge of the world, this gives you a sense of the collection and the space itself. So we're sitting in the espresso bar, and here we have a range of interactive kiosk systems, and these are organized in a way and tested on the public so that they make sense and that they're easy to use. And we take the same approach in any kinds of technological systems that we develop over the years.
We put into the galleries a tool called Nature Plus, which visitors get a barcoded ticket which they can collect information as they go round the exhibits, and when they go home and log into their computers, that information will all be aggregated together for them to enjoy after their visit. And that portal, the Nature Plus, also acts as a social media tool for dialogue and debate and discussion. So one of our most popular forums is our bug forum, where people can take photographs of insects they've seen, upload them, and our scientists will get back to them and tell them what insect that might be.
Each time we develop a new permanent gallery, either from scratch or if it's a refurbishment of a gallery, we're always looking to interactive media and what's currently out there to enhance how we can get our themes across to the public. We're always quite conscious, though, of not using interactive media and technologies for their own sake, so they have to be relevant. We've had to think quite strategically, how can we get the most amount of real estate in order to tell the stories about the specimens on display, and we've come up with a technology-based solution for that. So we're introducing digital labels, so a touch-sensitive surface where our visitors can really engage with the stories behind the objects through the technology within the gallery. We've got many screens within the Darwin Centre representing digitally what we have in our collections, and for us that's a great way of allowing the public to get really close with our specimens, but without endangering those specimens to the harsh environmental conditions that galleries often have.
We have many ideas, but of course the people in charge of the collection have to agree and see what benefit they can take from it. We all know that smartphones are becoming more and more powerful, and that more and more people will come to the museum using their smartphone, instead of taking an audio guide, for instance. And what I propose as a project, as a trial really, was to use QR codes within the exhibition rooms and to give people the ability to scan the QR code and to get the information on the smartphone. Some people found it interesting in the institution, some people didn't. Like for instance, some curators don't like the idea that people will come into the exhibition room very close to the painting to scan the QR code. Others say, and they are very right, that we say at the opening of the exhibition, don't use your smartphone, don't use your telephone in the exhibition room. So how are we going to explain that, yes, you can use them, but not too close just to scan QR codes, So all these remarks are true, but yet at the same time, I think it's part of the future. I think we have to think about them.
Ainda não temos a possibilidade de realizar exposições virtuais, ou seja, que elas estejam acontecendo no espaço virtual ao mesmo tempo em que elas estão acontecendo aqui no museu. Né? Já temos um projeto para isso, ainda estamos aguardando, na verdade, a verba, o financiamento. Agora, nós temos também uma preocupação grande com a possibilidade de oferecer ao público cursos dentro dessa área, principalmente para uma comunidade carente que não tem acesso, né, nem aos equipamentos, né, nem tampouco aos professores.
Não são nem coisas muito recentes, mas que eu acho que ajudam ao restaurador estabelecer uma linha de trabalho com segurança. Como se usa o raio ultravioleta, infravermelho, que você consegue ver a obra de arte desde o suporte até a sua película, os arrependimentos do artista, intervenções, acréscimos. Então, tudo isso, esses equipamentos ajudam ao restaurador se direcionar para uma intervenção mais criteriosa e mais segura em relação àquela obra de arte.
I think the really exciting things have to do with imaging and dissemination of images and the ability to share information within and across different museums. I think one of the most exciting things, though, about our job as restorers is the fact that while it may be informed more and more with better and richer information, you still have to maintain a certain amount of craft skills, traditional abilities to manipulate solvent and paint and fills and all those things which are, would be quite recognizable to anyone working on paintings for the last few centuries. So they exist side by side, but the technology, particularly in the scientific department and in imaging, has grown enormously, and it's extremely helpful to us. We would have a very good idea about extent of damages that might be existent, overpaints, we could know about layer structures. If we needed to, we could find out and probably know with great certainty about the composition of the varnishes that may be on top of the picture. All those things as the result of analytical work before we would even start, which could really inform treatment. And as you progress further, you could do pigment analysis on specific areas that could be extremely useful for being absolutely certain about the status of a color, an overpaint, for example. You can date pigments and be certain whether they might be from the period the picture purports to be. Those kinds of issues, they're all informed by the kind of technology that exists in the gallery, mostly in the scientific department.
We are trying to engage very sophisticated optical technology to detect conservation problems before they appear. When teaching at university, one of my colleagues is an engineer, and he is into this kind of optical sophisticated machinery, and he asked me, in fact, if I was interested in doing something on using multispectral analysis. So I said, why not? I've never heard of it before. And what happened, in fact, was that in the meantime, there are cameras who acquire, I should say, in fact, images where different bands of the spectrum are photographed separately, afterwards put together in one data cube. And it had also, this type of cameras, very high resolution. At the time, it was like 250, 260 megapixel, going up to 400, 450, which is huge. It's like 15 times a camera, a normal camera, meaning that you can zoom in into detail that you can't see with the naked eye. And one of the purposes of us engaging in this problem was, in this technology, was to find out whether you can detect problems before they are apparent on the surface.
A gente sente que o nosso público, grande parte dele, usa muito a internet, então a gente tem focado muito na internet, considerando que a gente vive não só o contexto em que a gente tem uma conexão generalizada, mas o contexto de mobilidade mesmo, no qual todo mundo pode acessar a internet no celular, no tablet, em casa, no shopping, o próprio museu tem Wi-Fi. Enfim, considerando esse contexto, a gente, através da mídia social, a gente atinge mesmo a pessoa onde ela está. O que a gente pode sentir de verdade depois que a gente começou a usar mídias sociais em específico é que as próprias publicações do museu, por exemplo, o nosso blog, ele subiu de forma quase exponencial em número de acessos, depois que a gente começou a compartilhar as coisas no Facebook e no próprio Twitter também.
In this time of internet and Facebook and Twitter and that kind of things, people get informed about what your museum is and what it does. To compare it with 20 years ago, immediate. So I believe this is the main challenge for the museums. How do you deal with that evolution in quick communication? That's the reason why we have also, in terms of the social media, for example, that we have somebody in charge of social media. We are very active in Twitter, we are very active in Facebook.
Well, we use social media tools. We have a Facebook page which is very lively and engaging, and a Twitter feed as well, and they're great tools for really engaging a much deeper relationship with our public, and it's very rewarding to see. It's one of the, for somebody of my age who's seen it coming quite recently into my career, it's really lovely to get that instant feedback from your audiences, so you can really see how the visitors are enjoying your work.
We have a very good communication department, but you don't communicate through the press or through invitation or press release the way you do it on Twitter or Facebook. So we had to set up a whole workflow, I would say, where we say, okay, this is what we want to this is the audience that we want to target, or this is the way we want to do it. Just give me the information, and someone in charge of the network technology, of the social network technology, will somehow rewrite it in a way that is suitable either for Twitter or Facebook or other. We also have projects using other means like Flickr, using the pictures that people take in a museum.
The new technology, like the website, is for us an extremely interesting tool, because it's the direct link with our public. And for the schools, teachers have already said often, it's fantastic, we have this tool now, because they don't have the time to prepare all this. For instance, you have the young adult. The young adult is especially difficult to grasp. But we had an exhibition about Stanley Kubrick, and all of us, we also used a lot of social media, and there we discovered that a lot of young people came, of course, because of the subject, that's one thing, but also because for the first time we used more the Twitter and the YouTube, and so thanks to these new technologies, we could reach that group up till now difficult to reach.
I really don't think at all, and that's what many people are still thinking, I really don't think at all that it will mean that less people will come to the museum. At the contrary, I think that people will use all these technologies to get more information, to give their advice, to get opinions. And that's the reason why they will come, because they will be able to say, I was there, and when they are here, to send it to their friends and say, okay, you should come and see by yourself and give your advice. I would like the museum to go further into these projects that I was mentioning, because as I said, it's always a try, we go 1, 2, 3 steps and then we stop because there's, we don't have the money, we don't have the time, we don't have the people. It's not really a priority. I think the priority, which is of course totally understandable, is on the collection and on the exhibition. And of course, what I'm trying to do is say, we know all these technologies. We try to push the museum into these technologies, but it takes time. I think it takes time in a big institution like this one. It won't happen just the next day. But slowly but surely, we'll do it.
The difficult task of the museums is what decisions you are going to make. I do not believe in a strategy that a museum has to pick up on all the trends and all the elements that show up and create something. I believe that you need to find a good balance between good opportunities, good needs for the audiences, good needs for the museums. And if these come together, then we have to pick up that and create this thing.
That's always a problem, I think, in all museums, to keep things up-to-date. It's not a problem to realize it, but then you need the personnel or the staff to continue with it. And that might be a difficulty, especially because in museums, most of the people have an experience or a profession which is history of arts or whatever, but not in technology. So today you need to be very polyvalent. I think that's one of the big challenges also, to give the staff formation. I'm sure that young people who arrive will have this completely integrated and will deal with it even if they have an arts historian certificate.
The challenges for digital media in cultural organisations are massive, because this is something that changes all the time. And it changes in two, I think, really important ways. One is the physical technology itself. So, for instance, a few years ago, we could never have dreamt what smartphones and tablets would do for us in terms of being able to reach new people and engage them with the collection. Social media a few years ago was really peripheral. Now it's absolutely central to what we do. So you have those challenges of technology moving on all the time, but you also have very real challenges of the public and what they expect to be able to do, how they expect to be able to interact with both the organisation, with each other and with the collection. And so we have to constantly be thinking about not only what are we doing right now, but to think 3, 5 years down the line, so that we're beginning to prepare ourselves for these new opportunities. I mean, there are opportunities and challenges in equal measure. But what is really key is that you're seeing cultural organisations taking this very seriously and starting to put digital at the heart of what it does. This is a public collection, and we're here for everybody. And that means both physically but also intellectually. And I think one of the greatest satisfactions I get in my role is to feel that I'm helping the public make a personal collection to the artwork. And my tools are contemporary communication tools. And that for me is very exciting, because it means, although this is a very well-established traditional organisation, it's been around for a long time. For me, what it means is that we have a future, and that we will be here in another 200 years, because we're always thinking about how to bring the public with us, and we're using technology to do that. And I think that's incredibly important and very valid.
A discussão sobre digitalização e interatividade coloca lado a lado as duas principais funções de um museu. Por um lado, preservar o acervo. Por outro, garantir um acesso público a esse acervo. Em médio e longo prazo, todos os museus vão acabar ampliando o uso de novas tecnologias. Resta aos gestores adaptar essas tecnologias às demandas e necessidades de cada museu. E você, conhece estratégias inovadoras nesse sentido? Conta pra gente, participe desse diálogo sobre gestão cultural. E não se esqueça de compartilhar esse conteúdo. Vamos incluir todo mundo nessa conversa. Este é o último episódio da temporada Museus da série Gestão Cultural Mundo Afora. Se você gostou, compartilhe. Vamos ampliar o diálogo sobre gestão cultural. Eu, da minha parte, prometo a você que essa conversa não vai parar por aqui. Em breve, uma nova temporada da série Desbravando Métodos de Gestão em algum lugar do mundo. A gente se encontra. Até a próxima!